in the chat as well. But now I want to go ahead and spotlight and introduce our speaker. So there's our speaker, Nevin, and I do a little introduction here. Nevin K is the director of the Austin, Texas-based Resist Trump campaign, whose mission is lawful, nonviolent resistance of Trump and his enablers. He's also an organizer with the first independent affiliate, Resist Austin. The campaign is looking to scale up its affiliate work by cultivating founders throughout its public webinar series, How to Be a Leader in the Trump Resistance, which runs on Thursday nights through the end of August. Nevin brings to his role 15 years of experience in strategy, consulting, leadership development, and international human rights. He's an alumnus of Harvard Law School's Juris Doctor program and began his career as a management consultant with the global firm McKinsey & Company. Thank you so much, Nevin, for being here.
Thank you, Cindy, for for giving me this opportunity. I just want to check real quick. Can you hear me okay? And
Yes, we
uh,
can hear you. Yep, looks good.
great, thank you. I'm going to share my screen and get things started. So let me see if I can just do that. And I would love to see all of y'all's beautiful faces. So feel free to come off of, or come on camera, so I could interact with you visually if you're comfortable doing so. I think my slides should be sharing. And I'm just going to set a timer, Cindy, for about like 35 minutes. So I think that'll give us about 15 minutes to do Q&A. Does that feel
Yep,
okay?
that works great. Thank you.
Sure. All right. So thanks again, Cindy, for allowing me to speak to this group. I know everyone here cares about democracy, otherwise you wouldn't be here. I also care about democracy too. As Cindy mentioned, I was a strategy consultant for a little under 15 years. Towards the end of that time, I spent some time as the co-chair of the International Human Rights Committee of the American Bar Association in a voluntary role. And in that role, I learned a lot about human rights and would interview human rights activists around the world, lawyers and human rights defenders in different places like the Philippines, Russia, Ecuador, and try and understand how American lawyers, as I am a licensed lawyer myself, though I've never practiced, how American lawyers could help the effort of the human rights, the plight of the human rights activists in these different places. So at some point, I decided, well, I wanted to get more networked in the space. So I decided to attend the Oslo Freedom Forum in Oslo that's run by the Human Rights Foundation. And so I attended that forum this past June 2024. And in that forum, I noticed at a side event, because I was just an attendee, I wasn't a speaker, just an attendee, kind of looking at network in the space. At the side event, there was there's really like a very common vibe in the human rights space. There's a lot of academics, there's a lot of nonprofit professionals, and there are activists, and all of those communities in this kind of space are somewhat subdued, either because they're serious about their profession or very intellectual or very kind of like hyper aware of their surroundings. But I noticed one person at this side event that had a very different manner than many of the other people there. Very jovial, very affable, and it was like almost infectious being around him. So much so, and I never even spoke to him, but so much so that just 1 second, check one thing. Yeah, so much so that I looked him up later, and it turns out that this guy was Srđan Popović, who is one of the founders of Otpor, the Serbian youth movement that successfully overthrew the dictator Slobodan Milosevic through nonviolent civil resistance in the late 90s. And so I looked him up later. I was like, oh, that's fascinating. And so I guess now what he does is he trains human rights defenders around the world to implement nonviolent civil resistance. He's a speaker, he's an author, he's a trainer, he's got an outfit called Canvas. Anyway, I just sort of filed that away in my mind. And then a few months later, because I was in June, a few months later, Trump announces, I guess, to the world, I don't know when this was, but I'm sure everyone remembers this. He said he would be willing to be a dictator on day one. Does everyone remember that? I'm seeing some nods. Yeah. So at that moment, I was like, wow, I wonder, if he's willing to be a dictator on day one, I guess we'll have to use like what the Serbians did, but that's never going to happen. He's not going to get elected. No way. Right. And then like in November, he gets elected. And so I was thinking to myself, I mean, this guy's really going to go for it. Like I used to play basketball when I was a kid, and they teach you not to broadcast your intentions. If you're a good point guard, who knows how to throw a no look pass, right? If Trump was a point guard, he would be the worst point guard ever because he broadcasts exactly what he wants to do, and then he does it. So when he said he was going to be a dictator, I was like, he's really going to try to be a dictator. Like we have to prepare for this, and I don't think the solutions that worked for Trump 1.0 are going to work this time around. He's more experienced. He's going to have like a battle tested cadre of enablers around him this time. He has Project 2025. Like he's really going to go for it. So at that time, like in November, when everyone in the Democratic Party, and I'm a Democrat, was like shell shocked and just like, soul searching, I was like, guys, we need to do something now. Like we can't wait. We need to do something right now. And so on November 7th, I started the Resist Trump campaign with the intention of um, implementing essentially what Sergei Popovich and his crew did in Serbia in the late 1990s towards a situation that may involve actual dictator in the United States. So here we are. And today's presentation is my opportunity to share with you kind of where we've come in the last 6 months this November or 7 months. Um, and where we hope to go, how you can get involved if you're interested, and that's pretty much it. Does that sound good to everyone? Give me the thumbs up if you're. I don't think this is cause for celebration, but that just like zooms. I still haven't figured out how to turn that off. Anyway, okay, so that's kind of the plan for today's talk. I'm using our orientation slides. We generally run an orientation once a week on Zoom, and so I'm just kind of using like selected slides from that. That's why it says orientation. We run that every night on Sunday nights. Okay, so as far as what we're going to talk about today, um, we're going to just briefly talk about authoritarianism and whether or not it's in America or not. I think given the crowd and the fact that Cindy just spoke in depth about all the things that are going on, it shouldn't be too hard to persuade people in this room that we have an authoritarian situation. Um, General ways to respond to authoritarianism that I've studied through scholarly frameworks and expert offerings, and then where the Resist Trump campaign kind of fits into that spectrum of resistance. We'll talk a little bit more about how we work, um, our distributed organizing model, our results to date. We have one affiliate in Austin where I live, so we have a hub, Resist Trump campaign, which is what I'm representing today. But we also have an affiliate, which is a local grassroots organization that I'm also a part of. Okay. And I'll tell you like how that's working because we want to build more of those affiliates that are connected to the hub. Talk about the campaign structure, and then if you want to get involved, what you can do right now to help. My theory on leadership is that if a job needs to be done and you are capable of doing it, you need to do it until the reinforcements show up. So that's why I got started with this project in November. And I hope that some of you are some of those reinforcements because we need them. So let me just jump into it. Right. So authoritarianism. We never thought it would happen, but it's happening. It's not just at our doorstep, it's in our house. I think some of you may have seen this meme before where there's a fire and a little puppy or dog is inside. He's like, this is fine. It's not fine, right? I don't think anyone here wants to have an authoritarian dictatorship in their own country. And I think that it can be argued that, and I'll share with you why it can be argued that we may have lost our democracy by the end of this year. There is an expert on democracy named Staffan Lindberg, who is the head of an organization called the Varieties of Democracy Project, run out of Sweden's University of Gothenburg. Their organization's name is VDEM. I'm going to just see if I can share that in the chat. By the way, I'm not following the chat, but feel free to interact there. I'm not going to be able to follow it, and I'll give this presentation. Okay, so that's VDEM. And VDEM has announced that, or they announced in March, that the US could lose its democracy status by, that was in March, within 6 months. So fast forward to September, like we're halfway there. It's possible and these are experts on democracies. That's the article that proves it that I just put in the chat. Um, if they're right, we may not be a democracy by September. I mean, how does that make you feel? Feel free to mention that in the chat. How does that make you feel? But anyway, um, that's my expression of the fact that I think we have a problem and that this is not fine. Uh, Fortunately, there are ways to respond to authoritarianism that I'm going to share with you right now. So there's someone named Maria Stephan. Has anyone ever heard of Maria Stephan? Feel free to raise your hand if you have. Okay, Maria Stephan is an expert in nonviolent civil resistance. I'll put a link to her biography in the chat. Has anyone heard of Erica Chenoweth here? No. Okay, interesting. Erica Chenoweth is also an expert on nonviolent civil resistance. They're both kind of contemporaries and co-authors of a number of articles and books. So Maria Stephan, who has studied nonviolent civil resistance around the world, which is a successful methodology for countering authoritarians, came up with this framework, right? It's the block, break, bridge, build framework. And what it means is that various groups and entities can engage in these strategies to counter authoritarianism in a cohesive and collective way. Blocking means stopping as much harm from happening as possible. Breaking means breaking the pillars of support of authoritarians. Building means developing power capable of achieving changes to our political and economic systems. And bridging refers to meeting across differences within and across movements and other key groups to deepen understanding, resolve conflicts, and build broad-based movements grounded in mutual interests. But we need all of those things to happen, right? We need blocking, we need breaking, we need bridging, we need building. And we need some coordination between these groups. And so this framework is helpful because it can help you categorize, okay, so who's doing the blocking, who's doing the breaking, who's doing the bridging, who's doing the building. So this is Maria Stephan's framework that she offered in this article in a publication called Waging Nonviolence, which I'll share in the chat right now. You can look at that later if you'd like. Anyway, she wrote that I think in November, and yeah, I think this is a helpful framework because it shares with us, like what are the different strategies that we need to use. But we're not the only group. Resist Trump campaign is not the only group out there, right? There's many groups that are trying to fight authoritarianism, and so we want to recognize who those groups are so that we can figure out, well, where do we fit into this big picture of countering authoritarians? So other blocking organizations, and this isn't like an exhaustive list that we're familiar with, are Indivisible, Protect Democracy, and the Democratic Party. I know everyone here has probably heard of Indivisible. I know Cindy mentioned Indivisible earlier in this call. Protect Democracy is a litigation outfit based out of DC, and the Democratic Party, everyone knows who that is. So think of them as the blockers who are kind of in the system trying to block policy by acts by legislators or court cases in the court system or other means. There's also groups that are focused on building, right? So building organizations, and by the way, it's not an exhaustive list. There may be others as well. There probably are. There most certainly are others. Some examples of building organizations would be New Politics Academy, Rise for Freedom, Strategic Nonviolence Academy, Party for Socialism and Liberation, all contributing in various ways to like a building approach to pushing back against authoritarians, whether it's leadership development, community organizing, party building, etc. Then there are breaking organizations. Has anyone here heard of 5051? Give me a quick raise of your hand. I see a couple there, some nods. Awesome. Tesla Takedown. Anyone heard of them? I know someone here mentioned they were part of the 7K Tesla Takedown, which is awesome. I love hearing that. And then General Strike. So protests, boycotts, strikes, all breaking functions that help break the pillars of support. Okay. And then bridging organizations like Crossing Party Lines, Braver Angels, and there are many others that you might find through the Listen First Coalition, which I'll also drop in the chat as well. They're just like, an organization that helps bridge people between their differences politically. And so that's a coalition of groups like Crossing Bright Lines and Bravery Angels. Okay, so I've given you a kind of an overview of this strategy for countering authoritarianism, but I want to kind of place where Resist Trump fits into that strategy. So, and I've also given you some examples of groups that kind of are employing different elements of that strategy. So, what is the Resist Trump campaign? Cindy mentioned that I was a strategy consultant, and that is correct. And so, you may have heard of the concept of mission, vision, and values. If you're a strategy consultant, you live by that. If you're not, you may have heard it in like some sort of strategic planning exercise or whatever. I think it's a good place to start to understand an organization. So I want to offer it to you now. Our vision is very frankly, a future without the problem that we have. Okay. A future without Trump and his enablers in power. That is our vision. That is the goal that we have for our organization. If we reach that goal, we have probably have succeeded in our work and we can do something else. But until then, we're going to do the work. What is the work? That's the mission, right? So the mission of our group is lawful, nonviolent civil resistance of Trump and his enablers. What is lawful nonviolent civil resistance? What does that even mean? Good question. I'll share with you this and then I'll go back and talk about our values. So this is a chart that we made in-house that shows the range of things people can do to express political dissent. It may not be a perfect chart, but it's something that we've worked on for a little while. We feel reasonably comfortable with it. So if you've got medium political engagement on this left-hand side, things like voting or writing to representatives, get a little higher on that, maybe running for office or canvassing or phone banking. But you move further out in terms of expressing your dissent in more assertive ways, like boycotts, strikes, picketing. That comprises a body of actions known as nonviolent civil resistance. And even within nonviolent civil resistance, we found that you can classify civil disobedience, which is deliberate public law breaking to protest injustice, like some of those Instagram or Facebook videos you may have seen of people blockading ICE from even coming down the road may be an example of civil disobedience, right? We don't do that at Resist Trump campaign. We stand in solidarity with people who choose to do that. But we decided early on from a strategic and practical viewpoint that those types of actions for an organization to do would be too risky. And it may be too polarizing to bring a large mass of people into our midst. So we only focus on lawful civil resistance, things like First Amendment acts of protest, encouraging boycotts, picketing, and other sorts of demonstrations. And we try to choose focal points like Tesla and others to express our discontent because they are supporting authoritarianism. Finally, I'll talk a little bit about our values. So we value collaboration, integrity, nonpartisanship. So we do welcome Republicans in our midst, or principled conservatives and principled Republicans who are uncomfortable with the direction of the Republican Party these days, and professionalism. Why professionalism? Kind of random at the end. Well, in a volunteer space, having a professional approach can help tremendously. And the task that we have in front of us, we believe requires a level of professionalism because it is such a serious, high stakes situation we have for our democracy. So that is our last value. That doesn't mean we're wearing suits to protest, but it does mean that we're, keeping our commitments, and things like that you would see in like a startup professional nonprofit, because that's basically what we are. All right, I'm going to keep moving and share. And I believe that this slideshow will be shared by Cindy. So no worries about getting the slides later. And you can always find it directly on the resisttrump.us website, which has all the links that I'm sharing today in various forms and various ways. If you kind of dig through the website, you'll find everything. Okay, so our theory of change, right? So I've talked to you about our mission, vision, and values, but what about like our strategy? That's what I want to talk about next. Here in this shared screen, what I'm showing you is how we intend to reach that vision, which is on the far left side, what we intend to do, right? But we intend to not do. Right? They say that every good strategy tells you when to say no, right? Because if you say yes to everything, you won't succeed because you're just saying yes to everything. You won't just be kind of, saying yes, saying yes, saying yes. But if you know what to say no to, you can kind of move through um, in a strategic way. So we're saying no to acting within government channels. We're leaving that to other groups that are doing important and effective work to lobby elected officials, like some of the groups I told you, like Indivisible, litigate cases, uh, you know, engage in voting registration or increasing the number of voters there are to vote people out, and then maneuvering politically within the system, right? Um, those folks are gearing towards let's say an institutional outcome of removing or replacing Trump, and we support that. We just don't do it. What we're doing is more pure nonviolent civil resistance, which relates to acting outside of government channels. And so we're looking to break pillars of support, bridge to Trump's base, build leaders of nonviolent civil resistance, and also ally with other anti-authoritarian groups. And our goal is a little bit different. It's more similar to what the Serbians did. We're looking to induce his resignation. It's a different goal, but it'll get us to the same outcome of a future without Trump and his enablers in power. Maybe we get there, maybe we don't, but we believe that even if we don't get there, we would have helped to remove or replace Trump in the process of doing the work that we're doing. So I'll do a little double click on breaking pillars of support. This is the Chenoweth concept. I referenced that author earlier in this talk. And that concept suggests or proposes that authoritarians are typically supported by institutional pillars like the corporate, media, cultural influencers, organized labor's pillars that support them, right? And so the idea behind the pillars of support strategy is that if you weaken enough of the pillars, right, by inducing defections in those pillars, the authoritarian will fall. Okay. That's been used in places like India for its independence, Serbia, the Philippines in the 80s with the Marcos regime, um, South Africa under the apartheid. That's what the pillars of support suggests. And that's what that kind of basic strategy is. And we employ that very directly in our Resist Austin affiliate with our Tesla takedowns, which focuses on Tesla as a corporate pillar or part of the corporate pillar, and Elon as a business and economic elite. And we're looking to induce defections from both Tesla stakeholders as well as Elon himself. May not be likely, but a lot of people didn't think it was likely that Tesla's brand would be decimated in the way that it has, and Tesla's quarterly sales would be decimated in the way that they have in the first quarter of 2025. We're also looking to bridge the Trump space, as I mentioned, by kind of ignoring the hard MAGA, medium MAGA types and talking to principled conservatives who are uncomfortable with the state of the United States as it currently is. And then finally, well, not finally, but next, we're also looking to build leaders of nonviolent civil resistance. And in doing so, we have developed a curriculum that we're running on Thursday nights, starting actually tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Central. So that's around this time, 5 p.m. Pacific, where we have like a 12 episode series to help people get through the steps of becoming a leader in the resistance. The first assignment people have is to just host a get together, maybe at your house or at a park, whatever. Then next, run a lawful protest. Could be a Tesla takedown, but it could also be something really simple, like protesting, Trump on your sidewalk with a sign and like two friends. Like that you could move from your living room to a sidewalk and complete assignments 1 and 2, and you'd be fine. But you can make it more complex, and maybe you would want to make it more complex than that. I think I saw in the chat that some people went to their first protest at No King's Day. It doesn't have to be a 20,000 person protest. It can be a 3-person protest. You're just building the muscle, right? And then finally, starting Resist Pod is the last piece of that, where we're looking to have people commit to doing actions that support democracy and resist authoritarianism. That's our leadership development curriculum. That's how we're looking to build leaders in nonviolent civil resistance. So we're doing building, bridging, and breaking work. Finally, we want to ally with other anti-authoritarian groups. So groups like 5051, especially in Austin, where we where we're working on the ground, 5051, Indivisible, a few Indivisibles, other groups like Nonviolent Austin, which is like a spiritual ally of ours, and other groups as well. We're developing relationships with them, and now we're starting to develop relationships with some groups regionally and nationally, like the Tesla Takedown Group, in which is I think based in Pacific Northwest, groups like yours and others. So yeah, that's kind of our basic strategy, right? Talk to you about our core principles, strategy. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about our results. But before I do that, I want to share this theory about distributed organizing. So distributed organizing is the basic approach that we're using to build this network of resistance and to deploy the strategy that I just described, ideally, right, all over the United States. Other distributed organizing networks that have succeeded in varying capacities include the Beto campaign, 350.org, XR, and Indivisible. And essentially what they represent are a network of peers that is led by one kind of peer organization that happens to be a hub. That is the central hub, right? And it gives, whether it's resources, training, materials, logistical support, whatever, to semi-autonomous affiliates that share a core DNA with the central hub. I found this to be a very powerful model because it has succeeded in so many cases in the last 10 years that I really wanted to employ it with the Resist Trump campaign. And so that's what the Resist Trump campaign essentially is trying to work towards, right? This is a lot of things going on in this, but think of the white boxes as things that haven't happened yet. The only things that have actually happened are the ones that have some color in them. The Human Liberty Project is the nonprofit that we have established. It's a Texas nonprofit corporation, and we have declared our intent to be a 501c4. Okay. We also got Resist Austin, which is its own Texas nonprofit corporation, is also applied or declared its intent to be a 501c4, so it can behave as one. And then we've got the Resist Trump campaign aiming to be a coordinating campaign. Now you see these white boxes, right? What do they represent? Well, the ones at the bottom represent future affiliates that we hope to grow, chapters, affiliates, and resist pods, right? Turning resist pods into chapters and affiliates. And then we also hope to establish other resistance campaigns towards other authoritarians under the Human Liberty Project. So, like, I don't know if anyone here has heard of Greg Abbott in Texas. I mean, Texas is probably like the lowest rank, or probably in the bottom five of qualities bottom five in the United States in terms of the quality of its state level democracy. I think an argument can be made that Greg Abbott is displaying authoritarian tendencies. Same with Ron DeSantis in Florida, or at least historically. And there are probably others as well, not just in the United States, but elsewhere. So in the future, kind of the big vision, right? And this is very early days. We've only formed our corporation in April. So we're like 3 months old, started in November. So we're very much a startup. We want to develop a network of affiliates around the country that are plugged into different resistance campaigns. So resist Trump, resist Abbott, maybe resist Orban, and contribute in different ways against those pillars of support, building bridges and building leaders. So have we done anything? I would argue that we have. And I would probably say that the best example is Resist Austin. I'll share the link to Resist Austin in the chat now. You can check it out. The New York Times recently recognized Resist Austin in an article about how Elon Musk is alienating many people in the city of Austin. Put that link in the chat. And then finally, this past Thursday, we conducted a project with Tesla Takedown, the national group, as well as Dawn Project, that got just like a massive amount of press coverage. And I've put the document that highlights all of those press links in the chat, like massive amount. And we exposed the dangerous nature of the full self-driving technology that is going to be employed on the robo taxis that will be released in Austin on June 22nd, that's 4 days from now, we had mannequins, 8 child mannequins, cross the street to reach a school bus that was stopped and had its flashing lights on, while a Tesla was driving down the street using full self-driving technology. All 8, not one, not two, all 8 were hit directly by the robotaxi, or by the, excuse me, by the model that will be a robotaxi, which which stopped and then drove over all 8. So it failed 8 out of 8 times, and it destroyed the mannequin 8 out of 8 times. Um, that was enlightening for me, not only to watch it, but then I actually sat in the last car that drove over the kid, the mannequin. You feel it jumping, and then it just keeps on driving as if nothing happened. This is the type of um, carelessness that Elon Musk has demonstrated, not only for our country, but for our community in Austin. And so that's why we do the work that we're doing by protesting him at stores and reminding consumers or future consumers of Teslas that if you test drive a Tesla, it's like test driving fascism, right? That's what we say to them, on our signs and sometimes on our bullhorns. So anyway, got a little heated there, but I care about this, so I guess it's natural. Um, we do want to grow, right? Because we believe that we can't take the situation for granted. We can't just depend on other people to solve the situation for us. I mean, I think 5051 is doing great work. Indivisible is doing great work, but I don't like to keep. I like to control my destiny, and I don't like to depend on others to solve massive problems that I have a big stake in. And so we're looking to fill in the gaps where 5051 and Indivisible and others aren't actually working. They're doing great at these big mobilization events like No Kings. That was amazing what they did. And we participated in No Kings in Austin. I actually spoke at No Kings in Austin in front of like 5,000 people. But Chenoweth themselves has noted that not all nonviolent civil resistance movements succeed. And sometimes when they don't succeed is when they over rely on a specific tactic like mass mobilization events. I mean, you can see these pictures of European societies like in Eastern Europe where just like hundreds of thousands of people are out, and yet they didn't succeed, or they're not succeeding, or the government isn't admitting defeat. Mass mobilization events may not be enough. And that's why we're doing this work, because we want to fill in those gaps. So we know that a key bottleneck in developing a distributed organizing network and in organizing generally is leadership development. So we have this leadership development series. We want to help train people around the country, like yourselves, like others, to take on leadership roles. It doesn't mean you have to be the top of an organization or whatever, but people can exhibit leadership in different ways, right? Whether it's organizing a meeting or standing in front when it matters or showing courage when it matters. And so this leadership development series that we have has 5 sections that it's all free. We've created the scaffolding where we have one webinar a week. We have Google Classroom, which is actually a great learning management system, in my opinion. We have a leadership lab once a week where you can kind of practice and take on step up roles even within the course, like being like a breakout room facilitator and getting a little training on how to do so. We have Discord, which is like an online community where you can interact with other resistance activists who are doing lawful nonviolent civil resistance. And then we have learning pods where you can interact with people in certain geographic areas and have like weekly calls. This is all free. The minimum kind of expectation if you want to do the work is basically spending 90 minutes a week on a Thursday night in class in the webinar. You can layer, you can stack on top of that if you'd like by joining the Google Classroom, by going to Leadership Lab, by joining the Discord. It might take at the most 5 hours a week. But again, it's optional. These are optional things. You don't expect them from you. All the basic minimum to participate is just to show up at the webinar. All right. I'm also going to talk about the Resist Trump campaign structure. So we have, I've told you a little bit about, what our results are to date. How do we actually work? Well, the tip of the spear, if I may call it that, is the organizing team in the campaign. That's comprised of campaign volunteers who are devoted to developing the organizing infrastructure of the campaign and delivering on the mission that I mentioned already. We also have supporting teams. The most important one, in my opinion, is the marketing team that does things like social media, creative, and other sorts of actions. Each of these teams meets once a week. We had a legal strategy and technology team separately, but a lot of that work's been done up front, like forming the corporation or setting up the Discord. And so now, excuse me, so now we meet together, the legal strategy and technology, once a week as a combined group, and we're looking to stand up a development team as the kind of fourth team, right? Organizing, marketing, legal strategy, technology as the third, and then development to help procure resources because it is a startup and we're going to be in need of resources, right? So that's how it works. Um, what can you do now? I've told you all about our campaign. How can you get involved? Well, there are many, like, there's basically two ways to get involved. Either, and I'll put these links in the chat right now, but we've got free free virtual public programming throughout the week that you can attend, like our free resistance school or our free call on Defend Harvard or our free call on Veterans Voices or our free call on, you know, organizers' experiences. And we have a public feed where you can just register, show up on a Zoom, and participate. We've also got that leadership development series that I mentioned. Episode one's going to be tomorrow night. You can join the Discord. I put the link in the chat. You can host an event. I mean, if you're ready to go and organize in your local area, use our Mobilize and do it. Like that'd be great. Um, Finally, if you want to join the campaign as a remote volunteer, you can do that by going through Idealist, which is a website. We just ask that you tell us why do you want to help us, and you submit your resume, and we can we can have a conversation to help place you on the campaign in a way that makes sense for your capacity, your interests, and your passions. Sorry, I just need to turn my timer off. It looks like we're getting close to the time that I set for myself. All right. So the last thing I want to do is share this quote with you. This is a quote by Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine was an American revolutionary and a French revolutionary. He was in both revolutions. Amazing. And they both succeeded. Um, and his quote in one of his books, I guess The Crisis, is that if there must be trouble, let it be in my day that my child may have peace, right? What he was saying is if there's going to be trouble, let me deal with it, right? Because I would rather I deal with it than my children have to deal with it. I don't even have children, but I know people who do. And I'll tell you what, trouble's here. Trouble's here now, right? You heard what Cindy said earlier in the call. Trouble's here now. So now's the time to do something about it. And so this is our response, and we hope that you'll find this to be informative, and we hope that you'll help us. Thank you.
Thanks, Nevin. We're going to go ahead. We have some time for a few questions. Go ahead and raise your hand or put it in the chat. I'm going to start with one question in the chat from Alex. What about those of us who want to assist instead of lead? How do you plug them in?
Yeah, great question. So I think there's lots of ways to assist. If you want to assist as a remote volunteer, I mean, tactically speaking, there are many ways to assist, right? Join the Discord, apply to be on the campaign. All of those are essentially, when they begin, primary, individual contributor roles, right? You're contributing your skills or your thoughts or your ideas or your talents, but you're not having to manage other people. You're still exhibiting leadership, and leadership and management can sometimes be conflated because they're not exactly the same thing. We're not asking for everyone to be a manager, but we do believe that everyone can be a leader, and you can even be a leader as an individual contributor. And we'll say that, you know, when you first enter a space, it's very unlikely that they'll put you in a manage or a supervisory or management role. You'll often have to prove that you have the integrity, you have the skills, you have the collaborative capacity to do that, and that's always available to you, or you can develop it. But in our campaign, we have folks who contribute as individual contributors, and they make a huge difference. And then, you know, even locally, if you wanted to start a chapter, you don't necessarily have to be the boss, but you just need to exhibit leadership in the form of getting the ball rolling. That alone is an act of leadership that makes a big difference. If it's just putting an event online and saying, you know what, I'm going to start this and the people will come. If I build it, they will come. They will come. People care about what's going on right now. And if they see something in their zip code on Mobilize that says resist Trump, and they see our orientation deck, and they see that we're serious and that you're a real person, they will come. So I think I dispute the question that you can have to choose between being a leader or being a non-leader. I think everyone can be a leader, even as an individual contributor, um, even just by getting the ball rolling.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point. I think people don't necessarily view themselves as leaders, so they get scared by that word alone. But, taking any type of action is taking a lead on something, right? So I think that's really important. Feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions or comments for Nevin. While we're waiting for some folks to raise their hand, I do have one question because I really believe that right now there's a lot of opportunities for people to get engaged, and what you're doing is giving people another opportunity to get engaged and work against what we're seeing right now under the Trump administration and all of his policies and so forth.
Absolutely. Sorry, was that a question, or are you
Well, it was
make?
more of no, probably more of a
Yeah,
statement. We do have questions now. Sorry.
no
Go ahead.
worries.
Start with Ken. Go ahead, Ken.
Thank you.
Okay. I just want to make sure I properly understand where fixed democracy first might fit in your scheme of the components to this resistance. Obviously, our name, Fixed Democracy First, indicates that we recognize that the democracy we've had hasn't been perfect by a long stretch, and is probably those imperfections are probably the reason we're stuck with this guy Trump now, because people have become disgruntled with the frustrating aspects of a democracy that's influenced too much by money. Our whole mission has been to make some changes in the way we practice democracy that we think will um, streamline the process and make it more reflective of the rank and file people, make it work more for people. Um, what I see us as having to do is enlist people to work towards that, uh, not to work to go back to a system that was frustrating to them, even though that previous system was certainly better than what Trump has in mind for us. But but really, what people should want to be heading for is a system that's better than the way we were practicing democracy, and that's I think the strategy that we're pursuing. Does that fit in that building section of your model?
I'm not an expert on the building breaking model as much as Maria Stefan is. I'm sharing my screen again so you can see it again, right? What
Mm-hmm.
Ken's referring to is does it fit into the four Bs is what it's sometimes called. Um, my initial reaction, without knowing a lot about fixed democracy first, is that based on what you said, trying to develop a vision of something in the future doesn't sound like you're breaking something. Like it doesn't sound like you're breaking the pillars of support. It also doesn't necessarily sound like you're blocking either, blocking Trump's policies. It doesn't sound like you're doing that work. It sounds mostly like you're building something like an alternative vision of what democracy could look like. I'm not an expert, but that's kind of where, and maybe bridging as well with new people who aren't like really, in the game. That's kind of where
Right.
I see that happening, but I'm not an expert.
Yeah, fixed
I see it
democracy first is a
as a way to
builder.
motivate people.
We're a builder.
Okay. Well,
There
thank
you go.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're fixed democracy first as a builder. We work on that advocacy part to strengthen democracy, increasing civic engagement, things like that. So we're definitely building it. Though we're getting more involved with some of those other areas like bridging and we want to educate people about other opportunities about blocking and braking as well. I see we do a little bit of the blocking work on when we're trying to fight against certain legislation, but we're mostly in the building and a little bit of the bridging field. That's where I see us. Rich, go ahead.
Okay, well, hi, I know.
Hi.
I have a sort of a different perspective, really, uh, because resisting Trump is working against something, and I think we need to work for something. If 5% more people had turned out in the presidential election, Trump would not be there. We have a problem in having people have faith in the two-party system or having faith in voting. We need to have people have voter turnout, and that solves all the problems they're trying to solve. If we have people become active voters, what a simple example is we've had last 20, 30 years, Right to Life is devoted 25 or 30% of time, wasteful time, to trying to promote pro-life agenda. And 85% of the people in this country want abortion to be available and affordable. Now, if we had all those people vote and have people vote for people that would support that issue or support Social Security, support things that are helpful to people, then we wouldn't have the problem we have with Trump or any other authoritarian or any other conservative Republican who does not want to serve the people. So that's what do you think about that point of view?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting point of view. I'm going to share a little bit again about our core principles. Um, when we talk about our vision, we admit that we're not even trying to solve all of the ills with American society. Like, we're not saying that lawful nonviolent civil resistance can necessarily fix xenophobia or misogyny or a apathy to democracy. We're saying that lawful nonviolent civil resistance is a proven methodology to dealing with authoritarians, period. And as far as like voting our way out of the current situation, I don't think that that strategy will work, to be honest with you. It may have worked in the past, or may have been something that could work in the past to address some of our society's ills. But with, proposed legislation like the SAVE Act, I think is what it's called, that could decimate our ability to even have a meaningful vote. I don't think that looking at that one block in the black that says voting them out, like, I don't think you want to leave the other strategies on the table. I think you want to try all of the strategies because if you put all your eggs in one basket of voting, I mean, God help you. Like, I don't think that's going to work this time around. I agree with much of what you said, and that I agree, people need to vote in larger numbers about the things that they care about. That's probably a cultural ill, but I'm not saying we have a solution to that. I'm saying we have a solution to something else.
Well, and I think you bring up a good point is that, increasing voting, electoral reform, the things that we work on are all important parts of things to work on. But the immediate moment right now is that we have somebody in the White House that really wants to be a dictator and engaging in fascist type of behavior. And the situation calls for something different at the moment and more immediate action because he's already in power. The voting has already happened. It doesn't mean that work can't continue going forward and ongoing. I like your chart here because it talks about, hey, there's work that certain groups are doing on those issues, but you're working on these other issues is to break some of those pillars that are keeping him in power and to prevent him from doing more harm. Would you
That's
agree?
right. I would. Yeah, I would. I think that all the work is important, but we've just identified an area of work that was basically being like, under or that wasn't having enough attention. And so we wanted to bring attention and resources and energy to it.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I believe that all of the above needs to happen, right? Like Rich is working on open primaries and ranked choice voting and top five, and those are all valuable things. but the work that you're doing to resist the current administration is vital and more immediate. Let's just say that's very immediate, correct? We need to do that like now.
I mean, it's sort of like if your house is on fire, like you wouldn't necessarily, I mean, you may want to approach the problem differently. We're like, let's grab the pails, put the fire out, right? We may want to rebuild the house and rebuild it differently. Maybe the house wasn't very good to begin with, but right now, let's just put the fire out. And that's how we are believing our approach fits metaphorically.
Yeah, absolutely. We have time probably for one more question. Do we have anybody that wants to ask one final question before we wrap it up for tonight? If not, I will be sending out a link to the recording and all the links as well as the chat, so you can get all of those links that were shared in the chat as well. But again, I think one reason why I invited you on and was happy that you reached out to me about presenting is that I keep getting asked from a lot of our members and people that attend our weekly happy hours here about what can they do now? What are the actions they can take? And I think this is just another example of other actions people can take. And like you said, you're filling in some gaps that maybe some of the other groups that are also very active not quite focusing on right now.
Thank you, Cindy.
Yeah.
Thanks again for this opportunity. This has been really nice to spend some time with you all tonight. And I'm grateful that we were able to have this conversation.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much, Nevin, for being here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll be back again next week, and hopefully, everyone has a wonderful week. Stay safe out there, but get involved. There's lots of opportunities to get involved, and Resist Trump movement is just one of those places you can do that. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Nevin. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Bye bye.